Today is February 2nd, International Sex Education Day, and we wanted to take this opportunity to give you the real sex education that you wish you had gotten. Now let's face it, the sex education that we got back in the day was almost a joke. Even today, majority of the people get their sex education by either watching pornography videos, reading articles here or there, or talking to friends and just listening to their experiences. Now imagine what will happen if the foundation of your sex life is based off watching porn videos that is heavily dominated on aggression, changing positions, going fast, fantasies, fetishes, and so many other scary things. But have you tried to answer some real questions like what truly satisfies a man and what truly satisfies a woman? What are the root causes of problems like anxiety, stress, premature ejaculation, erectile dysfunction when it comes to men, and lack of libido, unable to orgasm when it comes to women? What are the causes of lack of intimacy between partners and what can we do to restore it? Today I'm in conversation with Jacqui Olliver. Jacqui is a sex therapist who specializes in psychosexual relationships. She has been medically endorsed to solve emotional and sexual challenges without any drugs, all naturally. I'll tell you, this is one of the best episodes that I have recorded on this show just because of the rich information that she has given. I highly recommend everyone, especially youths and teenagers, to watch this video, learn something, and set themselves up for a healthy sex life. Miss Jacqui Olliver, it's such a pleasure and an honor to have you on the show today.
Thank you, Snehal. It's so good to be here.
For sure. So, if I got this right, you're currently a psychosexual therapist. Is that right, Jacqui?
Just about Psychosexual Relationship Specialist.
Okay. So can you tell us a little bit more on what is the role of a psychosexual therapist?
What I do as a Psychosexual Relationship Specialist is I help people to understand and align their emotions, their focus, and their physical actions. So they're not only aligned with themselves, but also aligned with the act that they're performing. So they are able to gain more of a sense of wholeness, of satisfaction, and to get their body working with their brain.
Lovely. So what I'm understanding is that, you have to align yourself within yourself, as well as the emotional aspect is important, right?
That's right. And that's where many people break down, is when an emotional response, for example, is triggered, then they try to repress that or try to disassociate from that emotion, whereas all that is required is to come back to their self, so that they're working with their biology instead of against their biology.
Wow. I like that one thing that you said is that, and it's true, as much as that people have the tendencies to ignore their emotional signals, the biological signals. And I think that is one of the reasons why I thought we'll chat with you today. And main reason is that let's break the taboo. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about it openly. Let's address the problems, because we don't know how many people out there might be in that same boat. And just because there is this mental block that people have that we should not be talking about it, and that is what we want to break and make it simple for people to understand, grasp, and it's not that complicated if you really want to look into it. So to start us off, Jacqui, one thing which I wanted to understand from you is can you explain why is sex so important? And I mean more than just reproduction. What is the bigger picture?
Sex is the one thing that, specifically to a relationship for two people in an intimate relationship, it's what causes the bonding, the deep emotional bonding. For example, men are much higher levels of testosterone. And this is interesting because it's got a tie into what you were saying before about our motivations for sex and why we come together and why a male is often thinking about sex. So as far as conversations go, for a male growing up, he's going to have a lot more conversations about sex and more thoughts about sex because he has this much higher level of testosterone, which is driving that sexual focus.
Okay.
Whereas for a female, we have much lower levels of testosterone, and this is why exercise is so important, especially body weight exercises, because it helps to increase testosterone and bring some more balance there. However, we have, as females, we have much higher levels of oxytocin, which is known as the bonding hormone. So we have men with high levels of testosterone, much lower levels of oxytocin. For females, we have much higher levels of oxytocin, lower levels of testosterone.
Yeah.
And for a male in a relationship, in a loving relationship, sexual activity increases his level of oxytocin. So it's sexual activity. Whereas for a female, holding hands, cuddling, snuggling, kissing, that just puts her oxytocin absolutely through the roof.
Oh, wow.
But it doesn't for a male. It's the actual sexual intimacy, sexual intercourse, which raises his level of oxytocin.
Okay.
Now, if we're looking at this from the emotional perspective, most women want to have a fulfilling emotional connection, which tends to make them feel more turned on sexually. For the male, he needs to have that sexual connection to feel more emotionally connected with his partner.
Interesting.
And what's really fascinating is that many women will think that men just want to have sex, that it's just a physical thing. But for the male, it's actually more of a bonding thing. It's the emotional connection. He gets massively increases the emotional connection through sexual intercourse.
Wow. Wow.
Now, I just want to drop in a little tip there.
Yeah.
Is that many women will be frustrated because their man is always wanting sex. He's not just always wanting sex, he's wanting intimacy. He's wanting that emotional connection that he gets through the sexual intimacy.
Interesting.
And if a woman initiates sex more often, it doesn't necessarily mean that you will have more sex than you do now.
Yeah.
It means that he doesn't feel pressured to initiate all the time and come across as being sexually needy. And he's feeling like, as his female partner, is wanting to contribute to that emotional connection by helping him feel more emotionally connected within that relationship.
Beautiful. And that is such an interesting aspect. What I understood from what you just said is that men reaches their levels of oxytocin through the sexual act, whereas females have a different angle to it. Like, as you mentioned, the emotional angle that is extremely strong. And it's not that men, of course, due to testosterone, the sex and the increase of attraction is always going to be there. But it's the intimacy and the high rises of oxytocin is what they are craving for, is what I understand. Is that right?
That's right.
Okay.
And another interesting point there is that when you know how to balance your emotional state, you touched on emotions before, and the reason why people try to ignore and suppress an emotional reaction is because it's our body's stress response. As soon as we feel emotionally triggered, we've got cortisol, we've got adrenaline, and it's pumping through our veins, and it's really intensely uncomfortable. And that's what we're trying to suppress. We're trying to suppress that feeling.
True.
And yet oxytocin is one of the balancing hormones for the stress hormones. So as your stress hormones lower, oxytocin naturally rises. So we have this push-pull going on with our stress hormones.
Interesting.
And looking at a relationship, when there is no sex there, or if the sex is unfulfilling,
True.
then you're going to have much higher levels of stress hormones.
Stress. Wow.
And that means you're going to be triggered. You're going to lean more towards depression because your thoughts are going to depress you. What you're imagining about your future and about what your partner might be experiencing and what they may be thinking about you and what they might be thinking about the relationship. So we have all of these elements going on, and this is why you need to solve sex problems fast.
Wow. It's, I think this is a completely new fact for me also. And I completely, as a male, I think I completely agree with the intimacy part, that it's not just about the sex, or it's not just about the act. It is about the intimacy and the level of connection that we feel. That is what gets us going, right? And to also not miss out on the fact that the way women will feel high rises of oxytocin is through those emotional avenues. So a message for men is that we should touch upon more on those emotional aspects, and that is what is probably the middle ground that we are getting at, right?
That's right. And what's really interesting about this, Snehal, is that our brain is wired toward survival.
Yeah.
So when we're emotionally triggered, our sex hormones, they take a back seat because our brain will put our survival first.
Yeah.
And when we are constantly triggered, then we're preventing that bonding from taking place. We're preventing ourselves from coming together and engaging with another person.
Yes.
But we also look scary. When we're triggered, we have roadrunner eyes, our eyes bulge, our face becomes tense and scary, and our voice is just strained. And that signals to the other person's brain that we're not safe.
Wow. Okay.
So if we're wanting to change our environment, we have to change it at the self level, get ourselves realigned, understand how to communicate using our whole social engagement system, which is either working for us or against us.
Beautiful.
And that includes our eyes, our facial expressions, our tone of voice, and our hand gestures, our body language, which is probably about 75% or more of all of our communication.
Yes. Very interesting, Jacqui. I love the aspect where you explain the why, like, as I asked you, and also there's a hidden answer in there, is that how men perceive sex and how women perceive sex through their levels of oxytocin and how to manage that. So I think that's a very wonderfully explained concept. Now, I was watching one of your interviews on internet, YouTube, and there was an interesting fact that caught my attention, and I wanted to ask you more on that. And the fact was that there were two facts that you mentioned. I'll take it as two separate questions. The first one you mentioned was that 1 in 3 men face erectile dysfunction and problems associated with that. And after the age of 40, 2 out of 3 men face that. So
that's right.
And that is an extremely interesting fact. I was not aware of that. So maybe a question for you from me as a male also is that, first, is that normal? And second is, how can men go about managing that?
Okay, so with regards to, first of all, the statistics, since I recorded that particular video a few years ago, I've done more research, and studies have shown that 40% of men over 40 experience erectile dysfunction.
Oh, wow.
And 40% of men under 40 experience erectile dysfunction.
Oh, wow.
Erectile dysfunction is not being able to get a hard erection, losing a hard erection, and also not being able to ejaculate.
Okay.
Now, each of these are really easy to solve with the correct knowledge and technique. I'll address your second question. Why are they so prevalent? Because we don't receive a sex education relevant to physically engaging in a sexual act.
Okay.
We're not taught how to focus our attention. Now, our brain runs on signals.
Yeah.
And these signals either come from our external environment, what's happening around us, or from our internal environment, which could be our thoughts, the way we are focusing our attention, and on the actions that we're focused on.
Okay.
Now, if I could use a car analogy, when we learn to drive a car, we're taught how to move through the gears in the right action with the right timing so we don't crash and we don't stall.
Yeah.
Sex education. We're given a car, a key, and a fuel voucher. No education on how to stay on the road and how to interact with other drivers on the road. There is no education given relevant to engaging in a sexual act. What happens is that when some men start experiencing weak erection problems right from the start.
Okay.
It might be the very first time they have sex.
Oh, wow.
Usually it's because they are too focused on their partner and their brain is not receiving enough arousing signals. So the brain doesn't turn on the erection program. It's just waiting for the most next relevant instruction.
Yeah.
Moving forward from that, so whether he has experienced the weak erection issue right from the start of sexual activity, or he's had a random thought about, might be related to a football game, or even going on a date with his partner, something that is unrelated to the sexual act that he's performing. And with his focus going sideways for too long a period of time during that sexual activity, his brain in all its great efficiency, you don't want the erection, let's switch it off.
Okay. So
what happens is he doesn't have the knowledge base of how to correctly focus his attention to immediately re-engage that erection program in his brain.
Okay. Would you say it is completely psychological, or does biology also play a role in that?
They work hand in hand. If I could give you an example here, we have my treatment is without drugs, no drugs at all. I just educate a person on how to align their brain with their body. And so with an erection enhancing drug that still needs sexual stimulus via focus to complete getting that hard erection.
Yeah.
Right. So I've treated so many clients who had erection enhancing drugs. They worked for a while and then they didn't work.
Okay.
And they were unable to get any result from it. So what happens there is that they are giving conflicting information to the brain.
Yeah.
So they're having the erection enhancing drug and then, I wonder if this is going to work. I'm not sure if it's going to work. It worked last time, but it didn't work this time. Okay. Or sometimes it works. And then I read about this study. Now he's completely disengaged from the sexual act that he's performing. His brain shuts down the program.
Oh, boy.
And the other horrifying aspect regarding drugs is that in a very small percentage of people, it can cause blindness or deafness. Very small percentage of people, but it's possible that could happen to you.
Yeah.
So the best answer is to understand how to coordinate your focus with your actions. So you're balancing your sexual focus between yourself, your partner, and the actions of sex. Wonderful. So that you give your brain the right amount of arousing signals in the right order. Wonderful. And you don't accidentally cancel out the erection program. And you don't accidentally overstimulate your brain sexually and cause early ejaculation. It becomes more like a chess game. It's like a game of strategy.
Totally.
Where you understand that this move will have this effect.
Beautiful.
This move will have this effect. Whereas when you have a sexual problem, you don't know what move you should be focusing on. You've got no idea how you should be focusing your attention. So you're all over the place and your brain's like, you want that? No, you want that? No. And it's total chaos and no fun at all.
Beautiful. And that is the sex education that we are talking about, right? Like, I don't think overall many people would know that something like erectile dysfunction or problems associated with that can be solved psychologically also. Like, who would know that it is actually happening because shift of focus, and there could be a practice and analysis in a way that we can do to make sure that we are focusing on that. And of course, we are not saying that we are completely ignoring the biological aspect. There are some things that we might need to consider, but majority could be psychological, and we need to pay attention to that, right?
That's right. And
Okay.
it's a fine balance. When our mind's not focused on the sexual act, there is no blood flow to the genital area.
Yeah.
If you start applying logic, then it becomes very obvious.
Yeah.
But then it just becomes that matter of knowing how much amount of arousing signals
True.
and the non-arousing signals, so that you've got that balance right, which
Totally.
is quite challenging for men.
No, for sure. And I have been on a side note, I have been listening to a lot of podcasts and stuff and about the human body, right? And they say that human body, every cell itself has its intelligence to repair, heal, and figure out its own thing. So as much as I'm not a big proponent of having medicines and tablets, try to avoid it as much as possible and use your natural body's energy to solve that. And that is what I feel you are also recommending. Very well explained, Jacqui. So now we talked about men. I also wanted to talk about the women aspect. There was a second fact that you had mentioned in that same interview and also different places, where that 4 out of 5 women find it difficult to get an orgasm. Is that right?
That's right. And that's particularly so during intercourse.
During an intercourse. Okay. And you also mentioned that 1 out of 3 women cannot even get an orgasm.
The numbers are high.
Wow.
The numbers are high. And so with women, we have more related to libido.
Yeah.
Now, what affects her libido is, again, how she is focusing her attention, but also there can be an inner vaginal dryness issue.
Okay.
And her partner might think, okay, we'll just use lube. Well, that's okay, but lube is for the outside, for the entry.
Yes.
Very essential, but it doesn't lubricate the inside walls of her vagina. So I teach women an inner vaginal flush technique. What the inner vaginal flush technique is, it's a muscular action. It's a pushing down motion with your vagina, which flushes all of the internal walls of the vagina.
Wow. Okay.
And she can do that. It's like blowing a kiss to her partner through her vagina. It's that pushing down motion.
Okay.
And that completely resolves that inner vaginal dryness issue, regardless of her age. She doesn't need hormone creams or topical creams to relieve that problem. So that's a problem. That's a issue that affects 50% of women. Once she reaches 40 and she's entering perimenopause, then that number increases.
Sure.
And something else that very much affects a woman because of her desire for that emotional connection is if her partner has a sexual function issue, such as losing erection hardness or early ejaculation.
Yeah.
So when a male has either of those problems, he's not emotionally connected. He's not present. He's trying his best to not allow that problem to happen and spoil their time together. So he's thinking about how to avoid this problem, which means that he's not present, which means that she's not feeling him, which means she's not feeling the emotional connection, which means that sex is less satisfying and less enjoyable, and she's going to want it less. And through those thoughts about what's happening with this issue over here, she's actually cancelling off her libido, turning it off.
Okay.
Now, to turn that libido back on, that's just a different muscular action. And that's flexing the vagina.
Flexing the vagina.
Flex and relax, flex and relax, flex and relax. Now, this is the pelvic floor muscle. A man can do this exercise too. And it's going to increase blood flow. What happens when you increase blood flow to an area? It makes you notice it.
Yes.
Right? So I gave a woman this exercise. I had a couple who came to me some years ago, and she had lost her libido after the birth of their first child 7 years prior.
Okay.
Both in their 30s, very fit, very healthy.
Yeah.
And she actually didn't like her partner's technique because his sexual education, as with many people, came from porn.
Yeah.
Hard and fast.
Yes.
Hard and fast, constant change of position.
That's
now, where a woman is positioned on the sexual arousal scale is if she doesn't know how to balance her sexual focus, which a male has to do and a female has to do in a different manner.
Yes.
If she doesn't know how to do this, then if her partner is changing position, constantly changing position, she's getting turned on, she's starting to warm up, she's starting to feel really good, she's starting to get close to an orgasm. And then he changes position. It's like, oh, okay.
Oh boy.
And so we go through this process several times. And then if he has a challenge ejaculating early or losing erection hardness,
yes,
then that amount of time to actually enable an orgasm to happen becomes shorter and shorter.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yet with the correct sex education knowledge, a female can get turned on, stay turned on, and easily reach an orgasm, and just keep doing that throughout the sexual act. So instead of getting sent back to the beginning, it's just rearranging her brain. It's just like a pivot, and then getting right back into it again.
Beautiful, beautiful. I love how in this answer that you just mentioned, there's an interconnection, there's an interdependency that both male and female, both of their roles are important in order to make sure. And it's not that one has all the responsibility. It's both the partners' responsibility. And if you both work as a team, as a partnership, then you are going to have a beautiful experience. And from what you said, as far as the females aspect, that there are physical exercises possible in order to increase your libido and also make sure that you are in that state. And of course, it's all about I think education also, which I want to touch upon next, that I think the right knowledge is very important, both for male and females. I know you mentioned sex education, and I wanted to ask you, so I would say something that I don't think I got a good sex education. I'm sure there'll be many in a similar boat as me. The only sex education that we had gotten back in, I guess, 10th or 11th grade was how to use a condom, how to prevent HIV diseases or STDs, and that's it. nothing more than that. And here are the male reproductive system, female reproductive system, and this is it. This is how reproduction happens. As far as sexual education goes, I think I don't know if it's a cultural thing or if just a community wise we need to upgrade ourselves, but I don't think we have that. And majority of our sex education, unfortunately, comes from watching porn, and that is what has been fed in our minds. Changing positions and going hard and being aggressive, or whatever porn, different styles and themes that porn teaches us. So I think a question I had for you was, of course, you and I think we both agree that sex education in today's aspect and the academic institution is not enough. What do you think is missing? And what should we cultivate in the curriculum when it comes to sex education?
What is needed to be cultivated is real life sex education.
Okay.
Sex education needs to set teenagers up for the real world, for real life relationships.
Mm-hmm.
The statistics for breakdown in relationship is something along the lines of 40% of or 50% of all relationships break down in 3 years. If they're married, it's 10 years because there tends to be kids involved.
Yeah.
A lot of this comes from emotional and sexual dissatisfaction.
Okay.
Just not knowing how to feel satisfied within that relationship, but also not knowing how to operate their bodies emotionally and sexually.
Okay.
when we have a problem we don't know how to solve, we are constantly ruminating about it, we're thinking about it, it consumes our focus, it affects our self-esteem, it affects our ability to relate, and therefore we find it more difficult to relate to others because we're triggered. And as I mentioned before, our body's social engagement system shows everybody when we're triggered, no matter how hard we try to suppress it.
True.
We need to know how to relate with other human beings on an emotional and sexual level. So there is part of a sex education must include dealing with the emotional response, our body's stress response.
Absolutely.
So that we can have the conversations that we need to find out from our partner. Now, and this is where a couple of topics converge here.
Yeah.
So when it comes to sex, we need to know what our partner wants and doesn't want.
Okay.
Our minds are contaminated with the porn education.
Yep.
Oh, every woman likes this, hard and fast, constantly changing position. No, she likes fantasy, she likes role play, she likes dirty talk. And yet many women don't want that. They just want that one-on-one connection.
Yes.
Whereas some other women want to engage in threesomes and orgies and other things that would horrify many people. And that's normal for them. And this comes down to sexual imprinting. At the moment, our sex education comes from what we have been mentally and visually imprinted with in our life experience. So some people who have grown up on the porn education think this is normal.
Yeah.
If they've had a high level of fantasy that they've watched within that porn education, that's their normal.
Yeah.
If they've grown up on romance novels, they're expecting the whole universe to explode with an orgasm, and it never does.
Yes.
So there is that, well, why doesn't that happen for me? It happens in all those romance novels. And so there is that degree of fantasy,
Yes.
both imagined and seen in what's currently available as sex education, that makes sex unrealistic on a life level.
Beautiful.
Sex education needs to explain the intricacies of connecting with another, of finding out what your partner likes and doesn't like.
Yes.
Because if you know what they like and what they don't like, you know what to focus on during sex. That's half your battle.
True.
But then knowing how to focus your attention within those actions so that you're balancing your focus between yourself, your partner, and the actions of sex.
Yep.
So sex education, it can be a wonderful thing.
Yeah.
And I like to call it enjoyable sex made easy.
Yes.
That's the ideal sex education for people.
Beautiful. And I think this itself is gold. The information that you just gave, that this is the true sex education that starting with teenagers at the age of 13, 14, they should start receiving this knowledge. And from the one thing that I extract from what you just said is that don't form illusions. And as unfortunate as it is, but porn and talking to friends or just reading books about something, it's just an illusion and a fantasy that we are creating our sexual life ahead. We are mapping it out, and that is what the expectation is from our partners. And maybe that is not the right way to do it. The right way to do it is probably educate yourself, and in the moment, whoever your partner is, understand their needs and improvise based on that. Very, very well said, Jacqui, and I love the breakdown, the way you have done it in a very simplistic way. I know you mentioned one aspect, and that was the connection aspect. Emotional and physical connection, right? And I wanted to talk to you and ask you about intimacy, okay? And as this might be possible for, say, partners who are like 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years into that relationship or marriage, but I think one issue and one of the most frequently asked questions on the internet was about intimacy, that partners feel lack of intimacy. They are not too attracted towards it. What is your take on that, and what are your thoughts for that, and can that be solved, and in how?
Well, it absolutely can be solved, and it relates especially to tension within the relationship. Tension within ourselves. We might be perceiving that our partner is doing something wrong, or be annoyed with any of their actions, something they're doing, something they're not doing. We're expecting them to fulfill our needs when we're not focusing on our own alignment and focusing our attention on what makes us feel good as individuals, which can be as simple as resolving your body's stress response. Soon as you resolve it, up goes the oxytocin, woohoo, feeling good, and you get a dose of those happy hormones.
Yes.
Dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, endorphins, a dose. You get all four from resolving your body's own stress response.
Wow.
Now, this has so many benefits in bringing people together.
Yeah.
When we feel out of alignment within ourselves, if we're feeling out of alignment, we're picky.
Yeah.
We're condescending, we're critical, we're needy, we're all of those unattractive things that we can be when we allow ourselves to be. And we can indulge in them to no end, and then blame our partner for their reaction to it. So then we get upset with them, even though we ourselves are the cause or have been the cause. So we have our actions, which are the cause of an effect in another person.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then what happens is this person becomes reactive.
True.
Now they're creating their own set of cause and effect.
Yeah.
And oh my gosh, so many times I've worked with couples and individuals who have said to me, oh, I feel like I'm always walking on eggshells. We can't have those conversations, those sensitive topics. We just can't talk about them without my partner blowing up about it. And I want to be close, but I don't want to be close because I don't know if they're going to accept me or not. I feel like I'm being isolated. I feel like I'm being rejected. And then the other person, when I'm working with couples, the other person is looking at them and then they look at me. And it's like, just explained exactly how I feel.
Oh, wow.
So often it happens all of the time. And yet when we bring it back, this is something everyone can do right now, is to be aware of their own causes.
Okay.
Their tonality, how you are communicating. If there is tension in your voice, then the other person is potentially going to be triggered by that tension, because that's what our brain does.
True.
And it's doesn't even appear to be a choice sometimes. Our brain is interpreting what's coming in through our environment. But it's also interpreting what's coming in through our imagination. And that more than anything triggers us.
Yeah.
So we can stop telling those stories of being a failure. Stop telling those stories of, if I do this, this will happen. And then we'll remember a triggered situation that was perhaps related to a sensitive topic, and then we will complete that conversation in our imagination. Do we do it once? No, we do it 10, 50, 100 times.
Yeah.
And each time that's reinforcing our body language. It's reinforcing our facial expression.
Lovely.
Our partner can walk in quite innocently, and we've just been denigrating them in our imagination or remembering how they were yesterday.
Yep.
And we're recreating that situation now.
100%.
And this is one of the leading causes of relationship breakdown and lack of intimacy in a relationship.
Okay.
Now, if you couple that with sexual function issues, that's when people start cheating.
Wow. Okay. This is I think you just solved the mystery and the root cause for it, right? And I think you just hit the nail right in the head, that we have our intimacy issues, we have this disconnect that we are not focusing on. And I think step one is first figuring out our own tensions and figuring out a way to get that balance within yourself. And then another is communication. It's not just what you're talking, but how you speak also that matters. And if your tone is tensed, the opposite person's brain is going to perceive it as a tensed conversation. Lovely.
Yes.
Excellent, Jacqui. So now I wanted to touch a little bit different aspect, Jacqui. I know right now a majority of the conversation that we had was mainly related to heterosexual relationships, right? A man and a woman. Although I also wanted to touch upon the homosexual relationships. So a question that I had for you was, all the immense rich knowledge that you gave before, do you think majority of that applies for the homosexual partners also, or for them is it a bit different?
I would say the way it works is similar, very similar. It's just the dynamics that are different.
Okay.
So my pre-recorded programs are written from the heterosexual perspective.
Yeah.
And because that is the largest number of people with these problems.
Sure.
Also, so a male to male connection works the same way. He has a penis, has a member, and his sex programs work the same way.
Okay.
For a female vagina to vagina, again, from the way the brain communicates, that's on the same level. When it comes to transgender, I don't know, that's outside my area of expertise.
Okay.
I know that emotions work the same way.
Okay.
Yes. If it's just gay sex, then yes, the concepts work the same.
Got it. Okay. So again, whatever knowledge, concepts and techniques that you mentioned before, if you are in a homosexual relationship also, like, those things will likely apply to you also, and you can improve your relationships also. Lovely. Now, Jacqui, I wanted to ask you, now say if people have more questions or more doubts about sexual aspect, like, sex education or just challenges related to sexual problems, what are some books or programs or videos that you might have? Do you have any recommendations?
Absolutely. I have 6 mastery programs, pre-recorded online programs for men and women. The 6 mastery for men is hard and in control. And for women, it's enjoyable sex and orgasms.
Okay.
This is the sex education you wish you had received at school.
Okay. Lovely.
It's the how to focus your attention and your actions so that enjoyable sex is made easy.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
That can be accessed online. It's 100% private and confidential.
Okay.
And you also have me to ask if you have any questions related to the program and how you're applying it in your own life.
Wonderful.
Just email me.
Wonderful.
And that email support is included. I also have a gift for listeners. So if you go to endtheproblem.com/more, there is a report on how to resolve intimacy issues and restore a happy and satisfying sex life.
Beautiful.
So just what you need to look at, it's understanding the problem and the focusing sequence that is required so that you can restore full sexual function. But even for parents out there who are wanting their teen to have a relevant sex education that's actually for real life, for long-term relationships that they can't give their child because they don't have it themselves. These 6 mastery programs are a preventative as well as solving any issues encountered.
Lovely.
And they can also be accessed through that endtheproblem.com/more.
Lovely. And we'll also put down these 2 links in the description if our viewers want to go ahead and check out and also enroll for that. Lovely. So Jacqui, coming to the last segment of this interview, this show is called It's Not That Complicated. And the whole idea is to take such broad, big topics out there, which are not too often talked about, and make it simple for people to understand. I think you did a wonderful job today. So to sum it up, if you had to give, say, 3 recommendations or 3 call to actions for our viewers, that they can start doing today in order to address and navigate their sexual challenges and problems in their lives, what would it be?
Okay, so the first thing that you would need to do is to get clear on what your ideal outcome is.
Okay.
Male or female, male might be to be able to get hard, stay hard, and ejaculate when both partners are ready. A woman might be to easily get turned on, stay turned on, and enjoy sex and orgasms. But get very clear on your outcome. There's a part of our brain called the reticular activating system, which makes us notice more of whatever we're focusing our attention on. So we want to focus on getting to our ideal outcome and start imagining how that would be.
Okay.
Now, right on the back of that is to stop ruminating about past experiences and how you think you may have failed. Stop those. Just don't go back in time. We're wanting to go forward. We're wanting to get your brain on the reward pathway instead of the threat pathway. And that can only be done by knowing what your ideal outcome is and stopping that negative imagination.
Okay.
Along with that imagination is stopping the negative self-talk. So, I have this problem. A lot of times you might say, I have this problem because this, and this. No, you have this problem because you don't know how to focus your attention correctly. You solve that, you end the problem.
Beautiful. Okay.
So it becomes the third thing is to update your knowledge base.
Okay.
Get the real life sex education that enables enjoyable sex, and it's made easy. And it's something that you enjoy and look forward to instead of withdrawing from and hoping that one day the problem will go away. If you don't address the focusing issue, it won't go away because your brain will continue to receive the wrong signals.
Beautiful.
It's the most important thing.
Lovely, lovely. Those are some well said recommendations and CTAs. And Jacqui, I thoroughly enjoyed talking to you today. You explained everything about sex and the problems, and you gave immense knowledge, and I truly appreciate that. Thank you so much again.
Oh, you're welcome. It's been a real pleasure being here. Thank you, Snehal.
Thank you for watching this episode, guys. If you enjoyed this video, please do share it with your friends, family members, your students, kids, teenagers, anyone in your community. Let's help spread this message as much as possible and help break the taboo. Let's help each other out when it comes to the real sex education. We come up with such fantastic episodes every week, so make sure you press this subscribe button right here. Yeah, just subscribe.